I'm going to be talking about Ciro's Nightclub.
Right.
Ciro's was one of the most notable nightclubs of the old Sunset Strip, but the Ciro's we think of now actually started at a different location by a different person, and it has no connection, but I did the research, so you're going to have to hear about it.
I mean, what are the odds that there's two places called Ciro's?
Yeah, and they're named for completely different reasons, whatever. So the Ciro's, that doesn't matter. Let's talk about it a little bit. It was opened by Louis Adlon, who was the grandson of Lorenz Adlon. Now, his grandfather was pretty famous in Germany, and no, it wasn't for being the bullet that sped through Hitler's brain, allegedly. Grandpa Adlon was known for being the founder of the Adlon Hotel in Germany. It opened in 1907, and it would become one of Berlin's most important social gathering centers for the upper class. It survived both world wars with minimal damage, but it was later destroyed in a fire, according to legend. That was actually started in the wine cellar by
firebombing.
It was a fire from a blitzkrieg. Well, I don't know what that is. Some drunken Red Army soldiers were in the wine cellar and accidentally set it on fire.
Really?
Fire purifies all. Anywho, his grandson Louis Adlon spent his younger years there at the Hotel Adlon. After boarding school, his family immigrates to America. I read somewhere that the rise of Nazism was why they fled, and why he would not become the owner of this prestigious hotel. I'm not sure when they arrive in Los Angeles or if it's just Louis, but in 1931 he starts getting mentioned in the LA Times. From what I can gather, he and his father, Louis Adlon Sr., spent 7 years touring America to examine American hospitality and service in hotels.
Sounds like spies.
I thought the same thing. I'm like, you're measuring curtains? What do you want from us?
So you left right when the Nazis are getting into power to tour the United States.
And check out hotels which you can house people, undesirables perhaps.
Checking out how comfortable each mattress is in the United States for a strong, pure German back.
I bet I can fit 45 people in this hotel room. By 1931, Junior was 23 and being called the assistant manager of the Adlon Hotel of Berlin, his own father now being the owner and heir of the hotel and several more like it. Louis Jr. spent several days in Pasadena where he inspected the Raymond Hotel, the Green, and the Maryland hotels. That same year, another article boasts that the young Adlon has a profound interest in films and had hopes of returning to Berlin to produce some. It didn't happen. I think from that point, he started landing small film roles, I guess playing like a waiter in a movie in New York.
He's the sixth biggest star in early Hollywood.
I know, and I'm like, I have no idea. Charlie Chapo. I have no idea. El Chapo. All of this is saying that February of 1934, he opens the first iteration of Ciro's with Eric Alexander and George Sorrell as co-owners. More is known about Louis Adlon than of his version of Ciro's, which was not on the Sunset Strip, wasn't even on Sunset. This Ciro's was somewhere on Hollywood Boulevard, not quite sure where. This Ciro's club was informally
great information.
I know, me too. This
me
Ciro's.
Too.
Oh wait, what did you say?
I said this is great information.
I thought you said I love good information, and I said me too.
I thought you said I love you.
Don't worry about that. You'll never hear. This Ciro's club was informally part of the chain of Ciro's that can be found in London, Paris, and Berlin. Ciro's Hollywood, this version did not last a year. As for Louis Adlon, he continued as a bit actor, and in July of 1944, he married a composer named Rose Davies, sister of Marion Davies. He became a war correspondent and died in 1947. His great-nephew, Percy Adlon, made a semi-documentary based on the Hotel Adlon, and his great-uncle, Louis, who we're talking about, was the main character of this. Percy, the director of that, his daughter-in-law is Pamela Adlon.
Whoa.
I know. Pretty much all of what I said just leads to that because I wanted to bring up Pamela Adlon.
I purposely went down a historical cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's pretty weird, right?
Not really related to anything, but it's pretty crazy.
Pretty neat. Yeah. I like to make this whole podcast about me making connections.
This whole podcast is 10 degrees of Pamela Adlon at this point.
I would listen to that podcast. Kid Rock was on King of the Hill, and Pamela Adlon did the voice of...
She did Bobby, didn't she?
Bobby.
She did, yeah. Pamela Adlon did Hank Hill's.
I always forget Bobby's name. I'm like, Ted, what's his name? I could draw him if I needed to.
Boomhauer Hill.
I love Boomhauer. The next year. Mm-hmm. No. Yes, the next year. New Year's Eve.
Love you.
I love you. The next year, on New Year's Eve, 1935, Club Seville was opened on the Sunset Strip at 8433 Sunset Boulevard at Sunset and North Olive Drive. It was opened by a couple of guys.
Let me check my map that I have written on this parking structure here. Is that part of the Sunset Strip, technically? Yeah, okay.
You know exactly where this is at.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, you do. Have you ever been there before?
To the place it became?
Yeah.
No, I've never.
Have you never been there before?
No.
Wow, that's weird. It's almost like you hate stand-up, huh?
I hate it there, yeah. Want to go see Dane Cook drop in on a performance by a nobody?
Who did I see? Oh, Bobby Hill.
I saw Boomhauer Lee.
I saw Boomhauer Lee. It was opened by
Boomhauer.
It was opened by a couple of guys, Marcel Lamaze and Alfred de Freitas, who was a former assistant director. Lamaze, I guess it's Lamaze, would be in charge of the cuisine, while Nell Roy, the musical comedy star, was the house act. Joy Lee's orchestra was the house band. The Freitas and Lamaze both had previous experiences with owning and operating Hollywood clubs. They had another Club Seville at 8428 Sunset that was was raided during Prohibition, and LeMay's was connected to the Clover Club at 8447. I think there was another speakeasy.
Yeah, there was like 2 other ones that we didn't really cover because they're speakeasies and they're top secret and there's not really any information about them.
Yeah, it had booze there. All within close proximity of where we are now. This new Club Seville was meant to cater to film and society folk. The big draw of the club was something called the Crystal Marine Room. The Crystal Marine Room was a dance floor made from sheets of glass over a giant aquarium, or as it was more romantically put, a crystal dance floor with subsurface fish, fountains, and color lights. So basically a dance floor.
Or in layman's term, a dance floor with a bunch of dead fish under it.
That's it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Wow.
It sounds kind of nice, but I think I'm mostly picturing the lighting and the way the water thing. Makes the water.
It's a nice idea.
Yeah, but like
I can see it being a total animal rights violation.
I can see me drowning in it.
You go on to with your iron dance shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
I got these from Givenchy.
I would be dancing in like old diving gear, like the metal and leather.
They're trying to start a new trend.
Why is there a shark in here? They also had
a shark is a mammal.
He's saying something about a candygram. I don't know. They also had an Arabian Night room, which I can only imagine was exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, there's a bunch of people from Saudi Arabia underneath glass of the dance floor.
And those curvy swords. What are they called?
Scimitars?
That's it.
They're called scimitars.
No, I'm pretty sure that's a man with horse legs.
No, that's a man with legs made of swords.
Careful where you run.
Careful what you run for.
Great gimmick, all this stuff. But still, Club Seville closed within the year.
What a weird, like, this room's underwater theme, and this one is Middle East theme.
Yeah, this one's
the opposite.
Sand.
Yeah, the place where there's no water.
Oh, it makes it look like an oasis. I get it. When you get to the Crystal Marine room, you're like, oh, cute.
Oh, I'm so thirsty. I got to crack open this dance floor.
Yeah, good thing they gave me a hammer at the door.
That's where the phrase cut a rug comes from. You cut right in there, get your drink.
That's where the phrase hammer time comes. Midnight, every night.
Who's thirsty?
Please, no!
Stop! It's hammer time!
Marcel LeMay's would try again at the same spot in 1938, and the name of the restaurant would be Marcel LeMay's, his own name.
Oh, okay.
That also only lasted a year. By 1939, it was closed again. Now we enter.
These places are so like they're closed for like a month, open for 2 months, closed for another month.
I'm gonna put my entire life savings into this place.
Yeah.
It was open for 15 minutes.
I'm bored now.
Where's the match?
I'm moving to San Francisco.
And now we enter the true story of Ciro's on the Sunset Strip, and we start with the old Villa Mallet Meekley.
Can't burn sand.
Sand.
Can't burn an aquarium.
I wrote this before I knew that you were going to talk about Wilkerson. Listeners of this show may already be familiar with him. It's Billy Wilkerson, but he's been on two previous episodes.
You're pulling an Aaron Mahnke right now.
I know.
And
this man, William Wilkerson, a.k.a. Billy Wilkerson, a.k.a. Big Dick. Like we were saying before, here's all his trading card info. He was born in Nashville in 1890, inherited his father's insurmountable gambling debts, worked at Nickelodeon in Jersey, fell in with a Laemmle Theater, tried to open his own movie studio and failed, tried to start one industry trade journal and failed, and in 1930 started the Hollywood Reporter, which he used years later to get the ball rolling on the Hollywood Blacklist, which named names and ruined lives. He did that. 37, he discovered Lana Turner at the Top Hat Malt Shop, a story that would launch 1,000 starry-eyed girls to come to Hollywood to be discovered. Among the many people that sought to personally fist fight him, like they would show up to his offices and try to fight him, here's two that stood out.
He had two sides of the waiting room. Who has an appointment? Who's here to fight?
Who's here to just like, and walk-ins. Here are two walk-ins. F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ronald Reagan.
At the same time.
I don't know you. Oh, I've heard of you. I read your short story.
It's the answer to that age-old question: who wins in a fight, F. Scott Fitzgerald or Ronald Reagan? That's God. Imagine. I mean,
to have your enemies be F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ronald Reagan is such a good life.
That's a good life, but also like, where do you stand if your enemy is Ronald Reagan, but also F. Scott Fitzgerald?
Reagan apparently slipped and fell 2 times on Wilkerson's polished floor. Trying to fight him. Billy later goes on.
The hospital patient?
Billy later goes on and opens a Flamingo Casino in Nevada. Pretty much creates Las Vegas with a bunch of other gangsters and shady people. And he maybe was responsible for Bugsy Siegel's death. If you want his whole story or the other parts of his story, Magazinophobia and Red is a New Blacklist are the other 2 episodes.
Oh yeah, that's the other one we mentioned him because I was only thinking the Hollywood Reporter.
You forgot that the Hollywood Reporter was behind the Blacklist.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I gotta cancel that subscription.
While the Hollywood Reporter is still in its infancy, Wilkerson through the 30s has different clubs he's opening, like we talked about. In 1933, he opens a Vendome restaurant. The same year, Louis Adlon Ciro's opens and closes. He opens a Trocadero. And then, of course, he burns it down with the help of Nola Hahn.
No. There was a fire with the help of Nola Hahn.
Fire purifies all. Anywho, now it was time for a new club on the Strip. Fresh start. And it would be at 8433 Sunset, the former Club Seville. He would commission George Vernon Russell again to design it, and Tom Douglas was hired to decorate it. Also, the name Ciro's has no connection to Louis Adlon Ciro's. Big Dick named his new glamorous club Ciro's after a bistro he liked to gamble in Monte Carlo. The exterior is really simple, sleek design Ciro's and a nice white script on the building. The interior was lavish. Red ceilings, red silk sofas. I think padded walls again, pale green.
Yeah, what is this with the padded walls?
They had heard about it in like insane asylums. And like, that sounds nice.
Comfortable.
I think he was afraid of like a mobster bashing his head against the wall. He's like, but if it's padded,
nothing here can be pointy.
Nothing that my head can go thud on.
Or people are just Lindy hopping so hard that they're like crashing through the walls in other clubs.
So they're like, you know what? We can't disturb the people next door. They run a good business. They have a bookstore. So
the walls are filled with sharks.
Also, there was pale green.
So they put all the dead sharks afterwards.
Finn's pointed out.
Pad those.
There's drapes everywhere, like pale green ribbed drapes everywhere. And when I say everywhere, like everyone's like every time I read it, they're like everywhere.
They serve your food and take off the silver thing drape.
They put a piece of the wall over it and they lift it. Ciro's had a large bandstand for performers and a spotlight at the entrance to make every person who entered feel like a star, even the already established stars. Ciro's opened January 30th, 1940, and according to different puff pieces, it was an immediate smash. It was the club on a Sunset Strip.
According to the Hollywood Reporter.
Basically, like I was about to, my next sentence, there was an ad running that said, everybody that's anybody will be at Ciro's, which ran in the Hollywood Reporter. When it first opened, it was a celebrities only club, which is like probably not, at the time, not hard to fill. The list of regulars and performers is huge. Like we always talk about, like a list full of, it's just like a long list. Through the years, you'd get a Billie Holiday, a Peggy Lee, Edith Piaf. Edith Piaf.
Edith Pie Eating Contest.
Yeah. Martin Lewis, Louis and Desi, my TV parents, Gary Cooper, Betty Grable. This on top of the already established partiers from Club Trocadero and the gangsters and the Hollywood folk. You had Marlene Dietrich, Judy Garland, James Stewart, Clark Gable, Carol Lombard, Lucy and Desi. I already said that. Henry Fonda.
And Desi and Lucy.
You had Desi and Lucy. You had Ricky and Lucy.
You had Ricky and Ricky.
Fred and Fred.
You know what's funny? I think we've talked about this, that his name's Desi Arnaz. The son on the show's name is Little Ricky.
Yeah.
And like, for some reason I was still thinking, but wait, why would they still name their child Little Ricky?
It's clearly his real name. I saw that episode of The Brady Bunch. His name is Little Ricky.
I could grasp that it was going one way, like real name doesn't go into the show fake name, but show fake name goes into the real world.
One of the biggest psychological trips to me was being a kid, and I was a huge fan growing up. There was like a block of like black and white on, I think on Fox, and it was I Love Lucy and Andy Griffith, and then there's other ones after that, and sometimes I watch Green Acres, sometimes I watch Beverly Hillbillies, but there's a couple episodes that you see Opie's friends, and one of the Opie's friends is the kid who played Little Ricky, who I'm like, yeah.
I didn't realize
and
that.
it like is startling because to me Little Ricky was really the son of Desi Arnaz, but you're supposed to be living in New York City in a cramped apartment with your godparents upstairs.
How'd you get to God knows where America?
North Carolina. That was one of the first times, because I never saw Lucy anywhere else. I never saw Desi anywhere else. I never saw Fred and Ethel anywhere else. Sometimes I'd see the people who'd like visit. Of course they make a big deal about
Superman.
George Reeves. He's famous.
Why'd we both go to George Reeves?
I know, because that's the only person. Because Harpo Marx is nobody.
Because we've seen one episode of I Love Lucy.
But to see an actor from there into another show is like,
weird.
that means that's not real? I don't understand. What are you trying to tell me right now? Who pays for the apartment? Are they subletting right now?
Wait a minute. So Vivian Vance isn't a landlord on their free time? But you know where you can see Lucy and Desi?
The grave. Where?
Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Ciro's. Close quote.
Thank you for bringing us back home. Luala Parsons and Hedda Hopper, two of the biggest gossipers at the time, considered Ciro's their office. Every table at Ciro's apparently had its own private telephone lines to call and make important Hollywood business calls.
Oh my God.
But Parsons and Hopper...
Billie Holiday just dropped a napkin.
She won't stop doing drugs. Parsons and Hopper would be using this to send immediate gossip to the publishers. Like you're talking about with Fink. It's the same thing with them. It's like they were like, what are you doing? Who's about to fight? They'd be sitting around waiting for drunk movie stars to get into brawls or waiting on scandals.
We talk about like, man, with Twitter, everything's just on there immediately. But little did they know there was a like transatlantic cable running across from Ciro's to the Hollywood Reporter building.
Giving Murray Hill 2555. You won't believe what Cary Grant just did. You just can't keep Cary Grant off the ladies. Okay. In the 50s, Frank Sinatra celebrated his first Academy Award win for the House I Live In at Ciro's. Sammy Davis Jr. had his big comeback show at Ciro's after his near-fatal car crash.
What's The House I Live In?
A movie that Frank Sinatra is in that I'll never watch because I don't like Frank Sinatra. Ciro's apparently had like little tucked away secret areas. There was a hidden women's parlor as like a safe space or a place of gossip for who knows.
Away from Hedda Hopper.
Yeah, exactly. Who probably had her own secret booth.
Right next door with a giant hole through a painting of someone's ear.
Yeah, it's not. There's another hidden gambling parlor made for gangster handsome Johnny Roselli, who we talked about already. It was made just for him.
The guy who killed Kennedy.
The man who might have killed Kennedy. the umbrella man himself.
The Manchurian Candidate himself.
You give a guy a copy of Catcher in the Rye, you don't know what he's going to do.
You don't know what icon from the 60s he's going to kill.
Cut to 2 years later. Ciro's is the most happening place on Censorship, which is the most happening place in Hollywood. So it's easy to say, Ciro's is the center of glamour.
Yeah.
It is a huge success. It is at this point where Billy Wilkerson got bored with it. And in 1942...
This place looks pretty flammable.
Something about all these padded walls that I planned full of dry brush. Yeah. By this point, he was gravitating...
If this place were to burn down, can my mom get dessert from here?
Can my mom get cocktails delivered to her home? By this point, he was gravitating towards a new scheme, opening a casino in the middle of the desert in Nevada. And after a failed attempt to open a casino in like Arrowhead, this is like all his attention was going towards Nevada.
It's so weird that like you can almost follow, I mean, this isn't a revelation, but like you can follow the trail of mafia and casinos by wherever Frank Sinatra lays his head.
Oh, where's he want to hang his hat this time? Yeah. Oh, we're probably going to have to start paying
Atlantic
those police.
City.
So it's time to part ways. It's time for Wilkerson to part ways with Ciro's. And apparently he again turned to Nola Hahn and was like, how do I do this? So this scheme...
I know I said I'd never ask you for a favor again.
But here I am. This scheme, though, would have to be wildly original to not look suspicious. It wasn't, though. They set another fire in January of 1943.
The building burned down a fire.
The fire set a bigger fire. So January 1943, there was a damaging and not suspicious fire from a lit cigarette in the cocktail lounge, and that was the culprit. The interior was severely damaged, as was the roof and 2 exterior walls, and all of the instruments of the Emil Coleman Orchestra were damaged. In total, the damages were $50,000. I said damaged a lot. Wilkerson managed to sell the nightclub in Hollywood to a guy named Albert Griffith.
Albert Grifter.
The owner of the Last Frontier Casino in Las Vegas, which I'm sure there was a deal there. But then Griffith died after someone mysteriously set him on fire. Kidding. He had a heart attack.
Spontaneously combusted.
Ciro's was then purchased by its new owner, Herman Hover, which every time I see his name, I want to say Hoover. It's Herman Hover, who was Wilkerson's longtime friend, and it was said right-hand man. Under Hover's command, Ciro's continues to thrive as a Hollywood hotspot. Hover went into Ciro's management alongside Marcel Lemaze, who was one of the owners of the club Seville, who was the previous occupant of that space. Hover saw to it that the layout of the club was rearranged, and the overall social atmosphere was about to change. For Hover's Ciro's, the public would get a chance to party with the stars at this new nightclub.
Diluting the atmosphere.
Exactly. Oh, boy, there's a owner of a restaurant next to me. Oh, God, can you imagine? Oh, God, the mayor's here. Can you imagine the mayor of Los Angeles?
You own a cow?
You've seen a cow before?
You've drank milk? You don't eat babies to stay alive?
Oh, God, I'm denting into a vegetarian. It also became a legitimate Sunset Strip hangout when he was forced to pay Mickey Cohen for protection. Every week, one of Mickey's goons would leave an empty box in the kitchen of Ciro's, and one of the employees would put bags of cash into it, at which point the cash box was taken back to Cohen's headquarters, Michael's exclusive haberdashery at 8804 Sunset Boulevard. If you want to hear that insane story, Alley Noir is a fantastic book that talks about how Mickey Cohen owned both a haberdashery and a floral shop, and he turned both of them illegitimate. Also, the haberdashery was on Sunset.
I wonder if that's where the urban legend that those flower stores are run by the mob.
Probably. Ciro's management also had ties with one of the lifelong villains of the city, L.A. Sheriff's Department, because they pretty much ran that area. Or they were in cahoots, one of my favorite words. Through the late 40s and into the 50s, Ciro's was not only known for the celebrity sightseeing that a regular rich guy Joe would see there, but also for celebrity fights. Ciro's known for celebrity fights.
The next place I'm going to get into is known for that too.
Really?
Yeah.
One of the biggest fights happened there between a French actor, Francois Tone, and a gossip columnist, Floribel Muir, after Tone walked by Muir's table and spat in her face.
That's how French people romance each other, though.
That's what I kind of thought. I'm like, oh, well, he's French. It might mean something else.
He's trying to marry her.
Are you trying to woo this person?
Woo.
I guess Muir wrote a really nasty thing about Tone and his wife, Barbara Payton, and when the two were both at Ciro's, they had words and stuff, and it started to get heated. And Muir asked Tone if he was angry, and Tone said the most old-timey Hollywood thing. Yes, I am. So mad, in fact, that I could just spit in your face. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. And then he spat in her face. 2020 is an act of terrorism, by the way.
He's so used to, like, silent movies that he has to have title cards before he does anything.
Hold on. He's still writing that down. There's apparently so many fights that Hover jokingly said that he was going to replace the dance floor with a boxing ring. He also said that...
Filled with sharks.
He also said that there was a limit on fights from customers. 3 brawls each, and then you're done at Ciro's. There was one exception. You want to guess who it was?
Errol Flynn.
Frank Sinatra.
Of course.
Of course.
Old blue eyes and scrawny arms lightly touches a guy, and suddenly a knife comes out from the other side through his chest, and he thinks he won the fight.
I picked a fight with a guy, then my friend shot him behind an alley, and now I won the fight.
I punched him so hard, he tumbled by the collar out into the back alley and got shot.
I punched him so hard, he ended up in a hole in the desert because of my 2 friends. In 1951, one of the biggest things that happened to Ciro's happened. A thing that whenever you look up Ciro's, it has 3 things. This is one of the 3 things. When Hover booked the burlesque superstar Lily Lily St. Cyr to perform, and all the shows were immediately sold out because Lily St. Cyr was a sensation.
That's a great burlesque drag name.
It's probably the best burlesque drag name there ever was. Lita Von Teese is maybe the second.
I don't know. I forget what I said about whoever I was talking about before, but I think it was pretty good.
I think that it was memorable.
It's not Carol Norman, is it?
So
Norman. Carol Norman.
Got it.
I get it.
Amanda.
Hug and Norman.
Amanda Huggin Man. Anyways.
Go on.
So all the shows, of course, immediately sold out. And it's just as the show was getting good, you know what that means? The sheriff department would raid Ciro, throwing everything into catastrophe and arresting Lily St. Cyr for indecency.
The human fire department.
Yeah, well, the human...
Not fire department, but,
I know what
the thing that the fire department's fighting.
Got it. How scandalous this would be in 1951, but of course it was all planned ahead of time. Hover's employee made the tip-off call to the undersheriff who already knew what was going on, and they threw a raid to get a story in the newspapers, and it totally worked. And the story for loot, act, and arrest were front-page news for weeks, and now it's 70 years later, and I have to write about it. But after all the glitz and glamour...
Advertising works.
Hey, you get it in the LA Times once, and I have to do research on it, and I'm mad. But after all the glitz and glamour of old Hollywood, right around the corner was hippy-dippy 60s. In 1957, the culture
Phase
was...
2 of Sunset
Exactly,
Strip.
yeah. In 1957, the culture was on the brink of change.
The showerless years. Go on.
Thanks. Ciro's just didn't have enough crowds anymore to justify paying the rent with little money that they were receiving. So Ciro's declared bankruptcy in 1957. A guy named Frank Scenes took over, and he ran it as New Ciro's for a while. Then in the 60s, as singer-songwriters infested the area with new clubs like the Whiskey and the Roxy, the spot where Ciro's went through several different owners and name changes as it was trying to take hold as a rock club. One of the names was Ciro's Le Disque, where the Byrds debuted, the band. And they had performances from The Doors, The Loving Spoonful, Bob Dylan, The Fifth Dimension, Sonny and Cher, and Jimi Hendrix. But then Ciro's Le Disque changed his name to It's Boss.
Wait a minute. A club was called It's Boss?
It's Boss, which is the most 60s SoCal thing I could think of. It's Boss.
That's embarrassing.
Was a name so bad the place closed for good after probably being...
It's closed.
It's closed, yeah. You're fired. It lasted until the late 60s, and in 1972, 8433 Sunset Boulevard became what it is now today, the Comedy Store. But it's not just the... Thank you.
Cocaine.
Heroin. Too much sweat. Accepted sexual harassment.
People who all went on to be bad people in real life.
Tucking tacky shirts into slacks. A
brick wall behind you, rolled up jacket sleeves on top of you.
But it's not just the address that's left over from Ciro's. Many people think that the ghosts who haunt the very haunted Comedy Store are spirits left behind from the days of Ciro's when it was a gangster-controlled nightclub. Yes. People online say the basement, which has been since renovated, was supposedly used to torture and kill those who posed a threat to the secrecy of the LA Mafia. I'm more afraid of the price of a 2-drink minimum at the Comedy Store than ghosts. And that's Ciro's becoming the Comedy Store.
I'd rather be tortured by
I'd rather be tortured.